outside? Should I run and hide? How do I take my company worldwide? Do you love the law? Did you watch Hee-Haw? What's the weirdest thing that you ever saw? What's it like in court? Favorite sport? Can you help with my book report? Is my hair too long? Am I right or wrong? And do you mind if I sing along to anything? Ask Alan anything in the world.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to this episode of Ask Alan, the podcast. I'm Alan Crone, the CEO of the Crone Law Firm, and I have with me today a good friend of mine and a fixture in the public relations and marketing firmament, particularly for law firms. He's been doing this a long time, Harlan Schillinger. Harlan, welcome to the show.
Welcome, Alan. Thank you so much. I really appreciate you asking me to be on.
Well, it's my pleasure. And, we have, just so that you know, our audience is made up of a lot of entrepreneurs of various stripes. Also, a lot of lawyers listen to this show as well as some executives. So I think everybody's always interested in, we were talking offline before we started recording about, how you get business, and everyone is interested in that. And you've been in that profession a long time. What do you think is the most common, I don't want to say misperception, but starting point for most entrepreneurs when they start looking to how they get business? Where should their head be at when they start thinking about that?
Many times the use in the word salesman has a positive or negative connotation. But the truth of the matter, Alan, is that we're all salesmen. We're selling something, or we're buying something, but primarily selling something. You're selling, your story to a jury. I'm selling my story to the press, or, to the public. And I think you got to have it in your head exactly what you're doing and what your outcome is, so that you can point your energy, in that direction. Now, that sounds pretty basic, and it's a softball question. I know you want to get started, but the truth of it is that, there's all different types of sales. Everybody's selling something, but it's a question of what style and what you're going after. But one thing I do know in sales or in advertising is you get what you ask for. So make sure that, I believe, having your head focused in the right direction of what am I really trying to do here and accomplish, I think is really important.
When I started my own firm several years ago, and I've started on this path of how to get business, I think probably the biggest mistake I made was thinking there was one thing I could do that would be a difference maker. And it seems to me that the one thing is a bunch of things that you've got to do.
That's true.
Very well for a long period of time.
It's been my experience. I got involved in the legal world in 1977, and I stumbled into making television commercials, or realizing that, this is about to really, open up, and aired my first television commercials in 1979. There isn't one thing. My mentor in advertising, when I began my advertising career in 1975, was a gentleman named Bill Meiskens. He was the executive creative director of J. Walter Thompson. I mean, he made really famous commercials that we all know. My very first task was, I got thrown into the Noxzema Take It All Off shoot with Joe Namath and Farrah Fawcett, and then it was Gannell and Knutson, and then Irish Spring and De Beers Diamonds. Bill was emphatic when he said, you get what you ask for. And that's really, really important, Alan. And the truth of it is, there really isn't one thing. It's a culmination of things, especially if you understand what you're branding, whether you understand branding, itself, the difference between branding and marketing. But the reason that it's a multi-pronged approach is you really don't know, and especially in this society where we have so many things going on, where do you go for business? Where do you get business? It isn't one thing. I do know that there's only one silver bullet that will solve everybody's problems, and I believe I have it right here. And it's for sale for $2.4 million if anybody really wants to buy it. I've been trying to peddle this for about 30 years. and nobody really wants to buy it because the truth is there isn't one silver bullet. There isn't any silver bullets, but there isn't one task. It's kind of interesting when you answer the phone, with, in your law firm, and you say, well, how did you hear of us? I personally believe it's the worst question you can ask, because the client doesn't know how he heard of you, or he doesn't recall, but he remembers the last thing they saw. And then you're saying, well, that's how they got to us. But the truth of it is, it's a multitude of things, and that's branding.
Well, if you got somebody who's just starting on this journey, what is the best foundational exercise that she could go through in order to begin to put together a plan to increase her business?
Well, I always believe in putting a strategic plan together. You can put it on a napkin, you can put it on in a book, you can put it on Word, but you have to have a plan. You have to say, this is what I want to do, this is how I'm going to go about it, and this is what my goal is. It's imperative. One of the most fundamental things that you have to have in this society, and again, this is my opinion, but the opinion of many, many people that are much smarter than I, is a solid digital website. You have to have a place that somebody can come to. It's your home. You invite people into your home. It's relationships. Marketing are relationships with people. And it's imperative to have a place that somebody can go, because they're going to look you up. No matter what you do, we're strapped to our telephone, we're strapped to Google. And, it's so easy to say, well, I think I'll find out about Alan Crone. People don't wake up in the morning and they say, well, I think I'll find out about him, or let me find out what he's doing. But if they're interested in you, they want to search knowledge. That sounds like a powerful and big term, but the truth is we're curious. We're going to Google you. You have to have a home for people to walk into.
And you don't necessarily have to have a website that's attracting business, but you definitely have to have a website that looks like you're in business.
Well, you want to, if you're selling yourself, which everybody is, you have to have a place that people can educate themselves about you. I mean, even if it's a picture, whatever it is, somebody wants to know something about you, they're going to Google you. And you have to have a place for them to walk into. It sounds simple. I think people spend way too much time thinking out websites and the mechanics of it and all of that. There's two ways to get business, through organic search, when somebody doesn't know you and they say, I'm going to look up, a good looking guy with, with brown hair, or I'm going to look up Alan Crone. And one is branded and one is not, and non-search. But at the end of the day, you really have to have a place that somebody can intelligently do homework on you. Because in this day and age, Alan, people don't do business with people that they don't trust. And the most trusting thing on a website, believe it or not, I'm not saying it is, but this is what Mr. Google says, is reviews. So you got to have a place that people can come to and learn about you.
That's true. And, I'm amazed if I have a new opposing counsel in a case, or a new referral source that I want to get to know. And the first thing I'm going to do is Google them. Because I need their name, address, and telephone number. Back in the day, the Bar Association would publish a list, and I'd go and look it up there. I'm amazed at the number of really serious lawyers that have no web presence at all, except for some unclaimed AVO profiles and lawyers.com profiles and that sort of thing. Do you have a hit list for the places that, if you're going to be in business, to where you ought to be on day one?
On day one, you have to have some kind of a web presence. You have to have some kind of a place where somebody can go to, whether it's a one-page web, whether it's not, whether it's a listing service like an AVO. But to get to your point, the majority of lawyers are really caught in the maze of practicing law and not practicing good business. But the truth of it is that we are in business. I mean, you're a fantastic lawyer. What makes you a good lawyer, a great lawyer, is you practice the oath that you signed on for, and you do all the things that your contract with the state of that you're licensed in. I will do this, I will do that, I will do this, and that's your contract. But what law school didn't teach you is business, and we are in a business. And it's imperative to act as if you're in business. I mean, you could be honestly the greatest business person in the world. I mean, my dear friend Mel Belli, and you remember Mel, he went broke because he didn't have good business sense. On the other hand, he made bunches of money, but he was a phenomenal lawyer. And it was kind of before we said, hey, this really is a business.
Well, and in 2022, particularly, the economies of scale really are in favor of public service providers, whether they're lawyers or anybody else, the ones who really are efficient, really understand how you make money and don't make money. Because if, as you say, if you're not making money, you're probably not going to be able to provide your services for very long.
Well, it's in addition to making money, it's keeping money. You really can't go through life without understanding how to manage money. I mean, it's one of the first things when our kids become, earners, or when they open up their first lemonade stand, you teach them, okay, well, a little bit goes here, a little bit goes here, put away for a rainy day, but manage your money, manage your time, manage your money. And that has become a paramount of paramount importance in the legal community and in any community, but particularly in the professional community.
I think a lot of lawyers would enjoy this conversation. You mentioned you got into the legal advertising business back in the late 70s when that was really just kind of getting off the ground. Can you talk a little bit about what that environment was like and what challenges both lawyers had and marketing and advertising professionals like you had in navigating that new frontier of television advertising?
Well, it was a new frontier. Advertising is not new. It's one of the oldest professions. But what was interesting is when the Supreme Court passed the decision, the Van Osten-Bates decision against the Arizona Republic, it opened up the opportunity, and the decision was based on the opportunity to inform the public of what their options are to pursue protection. That, in essence, and I'm paraphrasing that, was the deal. And so we stumbled into this legal advertising thing. I was making television commercials on a syndicated basis for very high-end retail. And I made a series of television commercials, and I still have them. With the exception of the wardrobes, I think we could still even run them. But this was an unknown. We were the black sheep of the family. Traditionally lawyers would get all their business from referral. It's a good old boys club. They'd control things. You'd get it from networking, and all of a sudden, we could go on television and advertise. And that opened up a tremendous floodgate. And the biggest thing that I was in shock over is how we were shunned. We were the absolute black sheep of the world. Lawyers would say, you can't do that. It's unethical. We don't like it. We don't want it. But really what we were doing is we were disruptors. We were disrupting their little game of, we're going to get all the cases and you're not. I remember I merged my business with a gentleman named Norton Fricke in Denver. And in 1981, Keith Jarrell from 2020 came and did an interview with us. And Norton very, very calmly said, when Tom said, well, what's the deal? He says, well, advertising to the public, we're giving access to the courtroom to the little guy. Most people don't know where to get a lawyer. We'd go to the yellow pages. They'd ask a friend. But now all of a sudden you could advertise. So we went out, we peddled these commercials. I think we signed up 58 law firms in the first 2 years and put people on television. And it was kind of amazing because for the first 15 years of this journey, Alan, there were no competitors. There were so few people. And the rebels, the people that decided to get into this business, Alan, they were young. They were business oriented. They said, by golly, I think I'm gonna take a flyer on this. I've got $1,000, $2,000, $3,000 a month, to spend on television. I mean, it didn't start off with these mega budgets and the sophistication of what you see now. We went on television and said, listen, if you've been injured, give me a call. And nothing could stop the floodgates. We couldn't handle the amount of business and the phone calls, that came forward. And then, of course, we had to develop, well, how do you deal with all this business? And how do you process it? And, the business started to really formulate, with software, managing files, managing intake. And that was the adventure that we were in. And then competition, snuck in. And as where you are, there's got to be 20 lawyers, that are advertising, let alone the ones that aren't advertising. But the one thing that I did learn, Alan, is that everybody advertises. Even the guys that were controlling the bar, they advertised. They advertised through cards. They advertised through seminars. They advertised through luncheons. They advertised through so many martinis. But they advertise, and everybody does it different. My dear friend Mark Garagos advertises. He just does it in a different way. He holds press conferences. That's invaluable. My dear friend Gloria Allred, she's a master of it. But no mistake, they're advertising. And so the evolution of advertising, just really came about. And now we're not such bad people. What was really funny, I have to tell you this, is what was really funny is I noticed about 5 or 8 years ago, and when I had my ad agency, I'd get phone calls from people wanting to know about, how did I do this? What was really funny was the people that hated us early on are now all of a sudden calling us because they had to. You can't survive without advertising.
What was going back to this idea of being shunned? What was the most remarkable no you got from a lawyer, and the reason why that lawyer decided not to advertise? You think of, I think people would get a kick out of that.
Oh no, I definitely know what that is. I can't handle what my friends will tell me and the community. They couldn't handle, and they were verbal about this. I can't handle the country club. I can't handle what my neighbors are going to think. My children, what am I going to do? I'm going to be such a black sheep. Honest to goodness, Alan, that stands out so much in my mind. And you just have to get over that. I'm of the belief that you can still advertise and practice great law. I love lawyers that practice law, because that's what it's about. Helping people. You signed an oath to do just that. Practicing good law is having vigorous representation for your clients, loyalty to your clients, educating them, working hard for them. That's the contract that you signed when you became a lawyer. And by the way, in all my years, I've always believed that contract is the strongest, and it's also the first thing that you ever signed. I never met a lawyer that really read it after they signed it.
And we try to go back periodically and look at those oaths, because for that very reason. That's why we're in it. And
well, you're an interesting cat. The reason I say that is, if I sit in and say, Alan, you're a great lawyer, it's not because of all the verdicts that you won. It's because of the way you treat people and the way you treat and foster your clients. That's what, in my eyes, makes you great. You follow your faith, you follow your conscience, you follow your heart, and you follow your brains. To me, that's what makes a great lawyer.
I agree. And I think most people, when they hire a lawyer, it's like when I hire a plumber, I don't understand what makes a great plumber. I just know if my faucets work. But it's the way that the plumber makes me feel when he's doing my work that's going to make me call him again. And whether that person is reliable, whether he cares whether I live or die. And, that's something that I know you take to heart. And it's something that we here really take to heart, is that it's about people. And anytime that we start talking about, my case or our cases, we got to we try to put a check on that, because it really is the client's case. And as long as you keep the client, whoever your client is, first and foremost, then I think you're going to be successful at just about anything.
Our legal term is to have a fiduciary duty to perform. And that's a real fancy word. But the truth is that when somebody calls you, and it's probably their worst day of their life, they're putting their lives in your hands, in their future, and their family. And that is a huge, huge responsibility. I mean, if you think about that, that is a huge responsibility. It took me, I hate to say it took me almost 50 years to truly understand this. My dad spent an awful lot of time hitting me over the head, and a couple of times he chased me with his belt too. But when you die, nobody cares how much money you have. You're not going to be judged by your money. You're going to be judged by how you treated people. And that really falls into where today is, and what's the competitive edge, and what's the difference between you and anybody else that's practicing law, and the advertisers. We're in a real paradigm shift here, Alan. People want service, and they understand the difference, but it's how you treat people. Look, you're going to be hard pressed to find anybody that's booked more television time than myself. I'm sure there's some young guns out there that are, knocking out the numbers. But over the 40 some odd years I've been in business, I can honestly tell you the best case that walks into your office is through referral, really from a past client. They're stable. They generally have a pretty important case. I mean, there's a lot of different factors, but they're calling you for trust. And the competitive edge that you have today is how that client, knowingly or not knowingly, bonded or not bonded, when they pick up that telephone, is greeted by your firm and how they are treated. That's it. And I don't care if you have the biggest practice or the smallest practice. Quite frankly, the big guns that are out there, the mega practices, the big players that have huge budgets, we sometimes call them mills, we sometimes call them machines, call them whatever you want. But the truth is they're struggling because the public knows the difference between empathy and no empathy.
It's
that's
true.
That's your competitive edge right now in this changing marketplace.
Well, in the as you say, in the 1977, the advertisement was perhaps the only information you could get about a particular lawyer. Now you can put an ad on television, but there's so much more information that's available, and that's what people want. That's why reviews are so important. That's why a good website is so important, because most savvy consumers, at least most of the clients that I want, the people that care enough about their case to try to find the right lawyer, they want to know more than just what they're going to see in a 30-second or 1-minute commercial, whether that's on a digital platform or television,
or a 2.5 minute video, that's produced by Crisp or anybody else. The truth of the matter is it's too easy to do homework on anyone. I mean, I could figure out, exactly who I'm dealing with while I'm talking to you, on this telephone. And we have to really recognize that. You can't hide, it's, and you used, educated or savvy. I have to tell you, Alan, that's not necessarily true anymore. You take this Hispanic population in this country. For years, we went after the Hispanic population on Telemundo. Well, that's great, but you know what the strongest way to reach the Hispanic population is digitally. I'm learning that. Mm-hmm. I didn't know that 2 years ago. I figured, television. But the truth of the matter is we get so much information from here. And when somebody comes into this country or somebody has a problem, they're going to immediately look them up. And I don't care if it's a blue-collar worker, a white-collar worker, or an orange worker. They're going to look you up. And if we underestimate that, we underestimate the power of the internet and the ease of the internet, why it's here and what people are doing with it, you're underestimating people.
I agree. And I think it's we are probably in a 1977 moment, in the sense that you've got a whole community of people that, you know, their business model is one thing and it's changing. And if those big firms you're talking about, if they don't change along with it, they won't be around for very long. And it certainly does give the advantage to a smaller practice to be nimble like that.
Well, it's not only happening in the legal community, but your other listeners, it's happening anywhere. You know, if we walk into a coffee shop, you know, how are we treated and why do we go here versus there? I mean, this is a paradigm shift back to how you feel about doing business. You know, brand is what people think of you when you're out of the room. Jeff Bezos said that so well.
Yes.
He actually is the one that came up with that. But right now, where we are with this pandemic, with the world upside down, changing, it's all about how people feel about doing business, because we can do business with so many people, it's so easy to do business. Yesterday, I got very frustrated. I'm trying to book a hotel in Dallas for my sister's daughter's wedding. And they passed me to 5 different people because I wanted to go out of the room block, you know, for just one night so I can come in early. Mm-hmm. Well, I wound up hanging up. I got so fed up. They were all trying to help, but they just kept passing me. You know, it's kind of interesting in a law firm. Think about when somebody calls, most people call the first person that they call the receptionist. Because that's the first person to answer the telephone. I call it the ambassador of first impressions. Everything will begin and end on that first phone call, believe it or not. How that person feels when they call your firm, Alan, is going to determine the outcome.
Yeah, well, you're absolutely right about that. And you talk about Bezos, and I got an email. This has probably been a few months ago, and I got an email from Amazon telling me that my package had been delivered at my house. But there was a picture of the package on my doorstep along with the email. And I went out in the hall and I gathered everybody around who was there and I showed it to them. I said, why am I showing this to you? And they said, you like the package? I said, no, I'm showing this to you because this is our competition. The fact that our clients are going to get used to getting a picture of their package when it hits there. I said, we need to start taking pictures of what we're doing and sending them to people. Let them see what they're doing for you. And that's the kind of thing that, and again, it doesn't matter whether you're in my business or you're a chiropractor or an insurance salesman or whatever, people are getting used to that transparency. And if you don't have it, I believe you're really going to lose out in pretty short order.
Well, I want to, step back to one of the very first things you asked me when we started this conversation. What are some of the obstacles? One of the biggest obstacles that people create is they don't make it easy for people to do business. What Jeff Bezos did was he made it very easy for you to understand the package was delivered and exactly where it is. I mean, he saved you all those steps. He gave you comfort. And we have to make it easy for people to do business with us. I was on the phone leaving a message for a client the other day, and they had an answering service, which is great. They answered it on the first call. They were very pleasant, but they were berating me with question after question and question. I just wanted to talk to Michael. I just wanted to leave a message. Okay. And finally, by the end of 3 or 4 minutes, it literally was going, tell me your website, tell me this. I mean, I just was exhausted. When somebody wants to do business with you, make it as easy as possible to do business. Let me. That's by the way, that is a big tip here.
I agree.
We don't make it easy for people.
No, I'll self-confess. When people came to see me back before, when people still came to the office, right? I would have them fill out what we call a white card, which was, contact information and so forth. And my former law partner and I started doing that because we thought, well, you go to the doctor, what's the first thing they have you do? Fill something out. So we wanted people to feel comfortable. Well, we started realizing that they'd already given this information to the intake people. Well, why am I filling this out again? Don't you people talk to each other? So it's those little things, particularly for lawyers, because lawyers, we can overthink things most of the time. And so I think that's a good tip, is try to streamline. Nobody wants to answer 100 questions, and nobody wants to answer 100 questions 2 or 3 times.
You talk about sending pictures to my clients. This is what I'm doing. One of the greatest things I think that came out of this pandemic is the use of Zoom or the use of FaceTime. And I'll tell you why. And we're all zoomed out. We're all burnt out. But if you think about this, I think it's vitally important to communicate with your clients, because that's the difference. Lawyers have a bad reputation for a reason. They don't return calls on a timely basis. They don't treat the client the way they want to be treated. But can you imagine how powerful it is if I have a meeting with you and I want to talk to you? Isn't it a lot stronger for me to look at you just the way I'm looking at you right now and saying, look, I'm working on your case. I've got a couple of questions. That almost has replaced, being in person. It will never replace being in person, but it sure is close. But what you're doing is you're having this relationship with somebody, and you're using these tools to create and foster that relationship. So I did probably 45, 48 podcasts during the since this pandemic came about. I guess people were calling on the gray hairs, because we've gone through different portions, different things in our lives. And I'm realizing, what's the good that's come out of this? And many people said, yeah, we're going to do that. Yes, I'm going to continue it. I have a few people, once this is settling down, continued some of the great things that we learned from this pandemic. How many conferences you've gone to? I always see you sitting in the front row, trying to suck up as much information as possible. I will never forget, by the way, it was last year or the year before at National Trial Lawyers. I was on stage and I saw you on the side of the room with your pad, writing away. And I have to tell you, you were my inspiration for keeping going that during that session. I saw you on the side.
Yeah.
But the point I'm trying to make here is that it's a relationship you have with people. And the Bible says, treat people the way you want to be treated. If you go back to basics and understand human nature, it's the greatest marketing tools that you can come up with, honest to goodness. But what we learned from the pandemic is how do we bring people together? And we abandon it. The point I was making with the conferences and such is we go and we listen and we write all these notes and we have all these grandiose plans on we're going to follow this person and do this and do that. And we go back to our practices and do nothing.
Yeah, that's the hardest part. That's the hardest part.
We pick too many things to do.
Well, that's the thing is you want to, at least I do. I always want to get everything done. And when you don't prioritize, I end up doing nothing. Because life gets in the way, and you've got to be disciplined. And let me get your reaction to this, because I know that I want to talk to you about intake, because I know you've got a history in that and a passion for it. And my advice to people is, before you spend another dime on marketing, advertising, branding, or whatever, you got to make sure that your intake funnel is constructed and doesn't have any holes in it. And I remember the first time I ever heard about intake was at the Mass Torts Made Perfect event in Las Vegas. And it was the late Steve Fairley who was talking about intake. And I want to say this was 2015, 2016, somewhere around there, I think. Late in my career. And it was the first time I'd ever heard anybody talk about it. And it just blew me away, because I realized that I was chasing business I already had. I just didn't treat that business very well. Can you talk a little bit about how important intake is and what's your advice for folks who aren't getting the kind of conversion they want to get?
Well, just to compliment our friend Steve Fairley, he was an interesting cat. He really understood intake and conversion and taught me so much. But I got involved with intake and conversion because I was in pain. And the only reason people do things, make changes, I should say, especially in our business or any business, is because you're in pain. Well, about 10 years ago, 15 years ago, my clients came to me, and as you know, I had a pretty sizable agency, which is still in business today. So it's in about 90 some odd markets. And my clients came to me and said, give me more leads. And I said, well, what'd you do with the last ones? Well, they weren't any good. And for years I was, understanding ROI and understanding, and I really didn't put two and two together because for some reason we had so much coming at us. And now all of a sudden it's competitive. I have competitors. My clients had competitors. And I realized that, wait a minute, what are they doing with, how can all of my leads be bad? I mean, I just scratched my head because, I have people on the other side of the state that are doing phenomenally well. The biggest hole that I discovered in any law firm is intake. It is also the biggest bucket for opportunity, and it's also a fixable commodity if you understand what's missing. And about 10 years ago, or maybe a little bit longer, I also trademarked what you don't know, you don't know. And the biggest problem with intake is what you don't know. You don't know what's happening. First of all, we delegate the first voice on the phone to the receptionist, who in most firms, and this is maybe old school thinking, and I don't believe this, I don't buy this, I should say, is that, well, it's the receptionist, least paid, over abused, biggest turnover. You're spending so much money on advertising to get that phone to ring, and we have a person we loathe, or we don't respect, or we don't support, or whatever you want to come up with answering the phone. Well, that's a problem. You're begging people to call you. So how are they treated? And intake is a process. Intake is a process of catching the ball and doing something with it. The other big hole in the bucket that I discovered is the lack of accountability in law firms. When I say lack of accountability, is law firms don't quite understand what they're missing, or they buy their way out of a problem, or they say, well, that person didn't want me anyway, or I didn't want that person. That's all nonsense. You take a look at your practice, and the very first thing that every lawyer that I've almost every lawyer I've ever met, they walk in and they say, how many cases do we sign? Okay, we know how many cases you sign, but they never walk in and say, how many calls did I get? Well, how many cases didn't I sign? Because they're not focused on what they're missing. They're only focused on what they're catching. And what they're missing is millions of dollars. And I really mean that. I said millions of dollars if you accumulate it. Do the math. Take a look at your intake. Number one, it's a process. Think about who's answering the telephone. Think about the path of the client. Always think about the client. Back to the oath that you took. What is that client's needs? The need is to talk to somebody. And the need is also to talk to somebody with compassion. It's amazing how many people answer the telephone, and I can get into specifics if we had time, and they don't say, how are you feeling? Alan, how are you feeling? How was your day? I mean, by golly, people are calling us because they just were in an accident. They don't know where to go. Their life is turned upside down. What do you mean, how am I feeling? But most firms, they're interested in what's your name? What's your number? What accident were you in? What's your date of birth? There's such a lack of compassion. But let's just think about it. How do you want to be treated? So re-look at your intake process. Look at the process. I'm a very, very big believer, as you know, of software. Because software gives me complete accountability. It tells me everything that took place. I don't know how you can make decisions in business without knowing everything about your business. How can you make a decision on advertising when you don't know where all your calls are coming from? How can you make a decision on your business if you don't know what a case is costing you? How can you make a decision on business when you're not converting, or you don't even know what conversions are? I'm telling you, the biggest opportunity in your practice on intake and conversion, Alan, is to understand my wanted cases. That means I want the case, and the conversion of what you signed. And every lawyer that I've ever met, almost every lawyer, it feels like every lawyer, that, oh, I get 94% of everybody that I want. And it's kind of interesting. I was talking to a friend outside a conference one day, and we're looking at his chart of calls, and we want to pick up about 20 cases. Very arrogant lawyer, I'm friends with him. He's left his arrogance behind because now he's much more humble. And I looked at this and I said, well, what about this guy? He says, well, that was a no-show. So you wanted it. Well, it was a no-show. Michael, just tell me you wanted the case. That's why you made the appointment. Well, we found 20 or 30 no-shows. And I said, why did they not show? Well, I don't know. If he was to pick up 5 of those cases, do the math. And that's what I mean by conversion. I mean, this conversation can go on forever with me about conversion. You know, the reason you have to have a process, Alan, is because if I call you today and I say, I'm going to talk to my wife or my husband, and I'll get back to you tomorrow, what is the process that you have the moment that phone hangs up? Are you in touch with them? Are you texting them? Are you calling them back tomorrow? Or are you waiting for them to call you? What I can tell you they're doing is they're shopping and they're talking to somebody else. And so having a process to know each and every step is a mandatory move in business.
Well, I can endorse that. I will tell you that when I made a point of installing some software for my intake folks, dedicating people just to intake and training them for it, I think that's a over or underestimated value, is having people that's all they do. But just tightening it up to that extent and reminding our folks to call people back, and monitoring how quickly we got to people on the phone, just tightening up that part of it, increased our signups, if that's what you're looking at, right? If you're looking at how many cases did you sign, you know, I think it was, I forget the exact number, but I think conservatively was 45 or 50% the first month, just doing those things.
Well,
and,
think about the math.
Yeah.
I mean, you just opened up a multi-million-dollar conversation, you know, over time. And that's net dollars because you've paid for that lead. That's without spending any more money on advertising. I mean, I was so passionate about intake and conversion that myself and my 2 partners created, you know, a piece of software. And I'm a believer of using any kind of CRM that's available. You know, my lead docket has just, you know, exploded, you know, with users, because people are waking up today to accountability. I mean, if I call you and I say, Alan, I'll get back to you tomorrow. I mean, what are you going to do? You're going to put it in a folder. You're going to put it on your desk. You're going to put it in a sticky. You know, what process do you have? I mean, what's going to happen between now and tomorrow? How many calls are you going to have? How many distractions you have? And a piece of software will tell you definitively, have you called Mary back? Or you haven't called Mary back.
That's right.
So that's what I mean by accountability.
No, that's true. Well, Harlan, I try to keep these to around 45 minutes. And we've gone a little bit over that. It's a fascinating conversation. It's always good to talk to somebody who's both knowledgeable and passionate about what they do. And you certainly are that person. And for full disclosure, I should probably tell everybody I use Lead Docket, and that you designed, and I've told you that. And it along with any, just to be fair, any other product out there that's similar, although this is designed specifically for law firms, it's the best investment I ever made years ago. And again, in full disclosure, I started with another piece of software and converted over to Lead Docket recently, fairly recently. But as I say, the point is not what product you use, but to use one. And as the Chinese proverb goes, the best memory is inferior to the most faded ink. And if you've got a software telling you and documenting it and keeping you disciplined, you can't go wrong with that.
No, you're absolutely correct, and I'm not here to sell lead docket. I'm here to help your audience understand some of the opportunities that are really out there, and all of these opportunities really are right in front of our faces. You just got to take the time to do it, and you got to take the time to understand your business, and it is a business.
Well, we're going to leave it there. Harlan, thank you so much. Thank you, everybody, for watching this episode. And if you enjoyed it, and of course you enjoyed it, it was great. Please share us on social media, comment, email it, however you can get this, just get it to somebody who needs to hear what Harlan just told us. So
I'd like to say one thing though,
absolutely,
Alan, is what we're talking about applies to every business. It's not just the law, whether it's medical or whether it's the clothing store that we go into. It's fundamental. The one book that I really suggest that everybody read, and I read it once a year, is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. 100-year-old. That is the Bible of marketing.
In fact, I gave that book to my son who's in sales. He's a sales major at University of Tennessee, Chattanooga. And I gave it to him and I said, Charlie, read this book. And he read it and he loved it. And I reread it with him. And it's been years since I read it. It's great advice to read that book once a year. Because if nothing else, it makes you a much nicer person.
It's the second most published book in the planet and read book next to the Bible.
Is that right? It's very valuable. Yeah. Yeah. Now, if they always talk about if you could go and talk to your 20-year-old self, what would you tell them? I would tell myself two things. One is networking and relationships really are the core of all of this. And read those classic books. Read Dale Carnegie. Read I'm going to start. Napoleon Hill. All of those books really do have a lot of wisdom in it, and they're not just old books that my grandfather read. I mean, they're good books, and you don't have to do this alone. There's all kinds of resources out there to help you in business, no matter what that business is. All right, so again, I appreciate everybody. I'm glad you brought up Dale Carnegie. Harlan is going to go help people connect with their clients and customers, and I'm going to go get some justice. Thank you all very much.